to welcome all of you and to share a little bit of information that might be helpful as we embark on this journey going through landscape design theory and process. So many of you may be aware, but this is a core course in our landscape design certificate. So many of you may be pursuing that certificate if you are looking for more information, in particular what courses are required and what might be coming up on our calendar. I would recommend visiting our website. I can drop a link in the chat right after this. Additionally, I just wanted to mention that as part of this course, we will be utilizing an online classroom. So the platform is called D2L or Brightspace, and you should have all received an invitation to join that course. So make sure you're looking in your email for that. If you've never taken a course with us before that utilized Brightspace, you will need to finish setting up your account. So you would have received an email prompting you to make a password. So if you do have any issues finding that, please be sure to reach out. I highly recommend that you begin with the Getting Started module. It will kind of demonstrate some of the functions of the online platform, as well as have some important information like a syllabus, information about your instructor, etc. Additionally, we record every live meeting of the course, and the recording will be posted to the online classroom as well. So that is available for you to go back and reference, or if you happen to miss a date, you can find it there. I will also put a couple emails into the chat as well. If you do have any issues with the online classroom or just general questions throughout the course, you can reach out to lmshelp@longwoodgardens.org or continuingeducation@longwoodgardens.org. Again, I'll put those in the chat momentarily. But with that, that's all the information I have to share. So I'm excited to pass things over to your instructor, Dan Maffei. He is the founding principal of Maffei Landscape Design in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, as well as a longtime Longwood Gardens instructor. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan.
Thanks, Emerson. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. Yes, I am a longtime instructor for both continuing education at Longwood and for the professional horticulture program. I really do enjoy sharing what I've learned over the many years in my career. I have a small practice in, well, not too far from Longwood Gardens, actually. We're in the same zip code. So we primarily work on projects that are residential in nature, although we do some smaller commercial properties that have a strong outdoor programming aspect to them, which I think is really appropriate that I get to teach this class, because that really is kind of the motivation or the centerpiece of this course, is to learn how to apply landscape design principles and process, theory and process, to small residential projects. And we're going to learn how to do that using an example project of a residential landscape that will test your skills as we learn over these 8 or 9 weeks that we have together. So I'm really interested in learning a couple of things about you and why you're here. So if you have your camera on, maybe by a show of hands, or if you want to use the reaction button and use your raise your hand button, I am curious to see who here thinks they're here because they are wanting to do this as a self-enrichment or personal project. This is like a personal reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like five or six hands. We have like 22 of us. Okay, so about a quarter of us. How many of you are here because you're already in the green industry in some way, shape, or form, and you're looking to transition into a different segment or supplement your landscape design skills? So a few of you, 1, 2, 3 or so, and maybe I might have a few on the other screen possibly. So a few of you there. Okay, great. See a couple others. Wonderful. And then the third category, and I found there's only three categories, is that you do something else and you're thinking about changing careers and you're thinking that landscape design might just be it. And a few of that. Good, fantastic. Any other reasons why you might be here? Like you're spying on me or something? A stalker? Or no stalkers? Okay, great. Is there any other? Is there any other? Is there another major reason I might have missed from any of you? Okay, great. Okay, so maybe like using the chat feature. Uh, who here thinks that you are the furthest away from Longwood Gardens? Eva's thinking maybe. I'm pulling up the chat. Seattle, okay. Yeah, Lindsay, I have some good friends in Seattle. You're going to see some pictures from Seattle, actually. So you're going to see some things you might recognize. So far, Lindsay wins with Seattle. Can anybody beat Seattle? No. Okay. Okay, so Lindsay, I guess maybe you just finished lunch and you're kind of getting settled in. That's great. Um, so that's wonderful. I really enjoy teaching this class online. Before it was just in the studio, in the classrooms at Longwood. And like the furthest we had away was like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most. Like Washington, D.C. was like the furthest I ever had. And they usually like quit like after about 4 weeks, or they just got tired of driving back and forth. So this is wonderful that we get to teach online. I will tell you that I was like skeptical that teaching landscape design online was going to work. And it actually turns out that I like it better. I can get a lot more like you can get closer to the things that I'm showing you. So especially when I'm doing drafting demonstrations, before we had to kind of crowd around my workstation, and this is much better. So this is going to be fun. So another thing that's interesting to note about this course is we're talking about landscape design, and design is the practice of using plants and incidental construction to create outdoor solutions to problems, challenges, or opportunities that the property owner might have. This class is not going to be about plants. So for those of you who live someplace other than the Mid-Atlantic region where I am located, we're not going to be species specific in this course, okay? We're going to be plant form specific, right? Large evergreen shrubs, tall canopy trees, low creeping ground covers, those kinds of things. We'll be talking in broad category type terms. So you actually get to have a break from any plant identification, plant combination, color combinations, cultural things. You don't have to solve any of those things in this course. As a matter of fact, if you start suggesting a lot of specific plants in your designs, I'm going to give you a correction and say, I don't want you to do that. So if you can, if you're like a plant geeky kind of a person, and you know who you are, try and resist the urge to actually name plants in this course. So this is actually, it's going to be better for this class to not think specifically about plants. So we're going to be talking about design principles that can be applied anywhere on the planet, right? Regardless of plant palette. Another thing is, I imagine since it was a prerequisite, and hopefully most of you did it, if you didn't, if you maybe got an exemption, but that this isn't really a course about graphics either. This is not about drafting per se. This is it. So you took Zach's course and he was all about the graphics, and he hounded you on scale and line weight and color and patterns and hatches and so forth and so on. You may have taken some other drawing courses for rendering or sketching and other things, and those are all important, and they build on what is important about this class. And I will be checking you for neatness, readability, legibility, completeness. But I'm not going to be teaching you how to do it per se, right? You should already have the foundation for it if you are here. So I don't have time to teach you it, but I will be checking you on it. So I'll be teaching you landscape design skills. We'll talk about what those things are. So based on what you know so far, do you feel like you're in the right place? We're in good shape. Great. Super. We've got, I see 18, so that means 17 of you are here out of the 22. So that's wonderful. Thanks for the thumbs up. Oh boy, new graphics, like the thumbs up floating through the screen. That's new. Nice. So I teach this course 2 times a year, this time, and I do it again starting in like February or something like that. So I had a summer break, so I'm back from summer break also. So welcome back to school. So each of our courses is going to follow, each session will follow a similar pattern, where we typically will start off with a review of last week's homework assignment. Then we'll go into a lecture, and then we'll do a studio demonstration. So before we get into doing those things, today's a little bit different, maybe some introductions. Emerson had mentioned the online platform, D2L, or Brightspace. I would like to share a few things with you. How many of you would say this like your first online course at Longwood? I see one hand, a couple of hands, a few hands. Okay. So I'm going to show you some things I think are very important in the online classroom, point those things out. Then we're going to go through the syllabus. I'm going to talk about what it means to be a landscape designer. We'll talk about the design process, and then we'll do some lecture on site inventory and base planning, and then we'll do a studio demonstration that'll prep you for next week's homework assignment. Oh, and by the way, I do enjoy this course as being interactive and conversational. I love it. Thank you for all of you who have your cameras on. That's wonderful. I love the feedback. Just see if you're awake or paying attention, or if you get my corny jokes. So that's helpful, but it's okay having your camera off too, no problem there. But I do appreciate the visual feedback and seeing human faces. It's very nice. So I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about the online platform. Okay. Is everybody seeing the home page right now? No, you're not.
We were.
Oh, you were seeing it. Okay, I thought I saw a no.
It took a second to load.
Yeah, it just takes a second.
Okay. Is it there now?
Yes.
Okay, super. Thanks, everyone. All right, so your landing page here for the course, it has these great tiles where you can click through the topics and go through. I'm going to dive into some more specific things across the tab, just because I like the way things are organized. Using the tiles down here will take you through each topic sequentially, and you can track your progress as you read it. I find for this course that I'm using this platform more as a way of storing my files and lectures so you can reference them later. Again, all of these lectures are being recorded, so you can go back and watch them. And also all of my presentations are here as stored files. So if you go up here to the content tab, and you can see all the things that are in the course. You can see here under getting started, there's the welcome, who I am. There's a nice little tutorial on how to use this space, which is great. And then down below that is the course syllabus and the supply list, which you should have gotten that notification as to what your required supplies are for the course ahead of time when you registered. If you didn't, send me a message. We'll make sure that you understand what you need, or you can check that list here and make sure that you get all of those things. I'm going to go back to the course syllabus in just a few minutes. Underneath that, we have design principles, and these are some of the lectures that I'll be giving over the coming weeks. And some I'll just do one lecture, and others we might do 2 in the evening, depending on how long they are. Then under design process, there's an outline here as to what the design process looks like. We're going to take a look at that this evening. And then some of the others, sequential processes that we use in our practice, and they're listed here sequentially. Then lastly is the design project. This has information about our hypothetical residential project that we'll be using as the basis for our homework assignments. All of our homework assignments are building on the landscape design process, and it'll be done sequentially in that process based on my lectures. And if you take all those lectures and complete the assignments in order, at the end of the course, you'll have a completed project, which will be your final assignment, which is your essentially your final exam, and it's all based on this project. We'll go over this a little bit later. You all should have received a hard copy base drawing on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper that is the site drawing for our course. Did everybody receive that? I see some nodding. I see a no from Erin. I see a nod from Catherine. If you did not receive it yet, either it's on its way and you should receive it shortly. If you have, and sometimes these things get delayed. It seems to happen every semester. It's just kind of these things happen. If you get anxious and tired of waiting and you really want to dive into the homework assignment and you don't have it yet, you can go to the project site plan. You can click on it, and then the base drawing shows up. And then you can go over here to the right and you can download it. And you can download it. It'll download as a PDF file. And then you can put that onto a flash drive or email it to one of a local copy shop or a Kinko's or a Staples or what have you, someplace that does copying. Because this is an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, so most likely you don't have a printer at home that holds that size paper. And it'll probably cost you like $1 or something like that to get printed, and then you can have it right away. So if you get tired of waiting, you can do that. Also, if something happens to your original, you can download it again and have it printed up at a copy shop. So it's there for you to use if you get tired of waiting. If that drawing doesn't, for those of you who haven't received it yet, if you don't get it in the next day or two, that would put you on Thursday. If you don't have it by Thursday, reach out to the CE office and say, hey, look, I don't have it yet. Could you tell me if it's coming or expedite it? They might send you a tracking link. And then if they can let you know if it's on its way or it should be there. Otherwise, you can download it and have it printed yourself. And then lastly, where the recordings are, there's no recordings yet because we haven't done anything yet, but you can find each recording there. Be sure to continue scrolling down that page. Oh, actually, I think the Zoom recordings, I think it's up here in this arrow, takes you to the next recording. So you may have, there we go, the weekly recordings. Just keep clicking through until you see the current week's recording. Sometimes they hide a little bit. So that's where you can find each week's recordings. And the CE office is usually pretty good about having those up within a day or so after its completion. You should be able to get right to it. Each week we'll have assignments due. I'm going to talk about those a little bit later when we get into the syllabus. And each week's assignments are here under that tab. They are again listed sequentially in order that they are due, with the due date posted prominently there. You can simply click on the heading for the assignment, and under that heading are the instructions for that particular assignment. And then when you're done, you can add the file. We'll talk about how I want you to submit the files, but it's just like uploading a file into any other place where you would typically upload a file. It works in much the same way. And you can add comments to me if you have some additional comments you want to put in there. Once you upload something into the file, it's in there. You can't get it back out again. But if you realize you wanted to supplement it later on before the deadline, you can submit it again. If I see multiples of what looks like the same file, I'll just look at the most current one, unless you tell me otherwise in the comments. That seemed fair to everybody. Okay, great. Fantastic. And then there's some other things. There's a discussion tab here, which I think is really cool, especially for you to network with your fellow classmates. So this area here, networking, is for you. For course questions and answers, I keep asking to take this away and keep not doing it. So it would be much better if you would actually just email me, and I'm going to show you where that there should be. Here we go. You can use the messenger, the pager, but I actually prefer it if you email me, and my email is at the top of the syllabus, and I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you that next. That's the best way to get me is by email. I don't really check this. It's just buried too deep. There's just way too many places to try and contact me, and I can't check them all. So that's where I would go. Okay. And then ultimately your grades will be posted here. I attempt to grade your work within a couple of days after the last course. So for instance, if you had a homework assignment due today, I would endeavor to have the grading done by Friday and have comments there. Okay. So let's go to the syllabus. I want to go over that with you. All right. So here's the syllabus under course content, under the getting started heading, under the content heading. So here's me and my email address. So you can get me there. That's the best way. That's the best way to reach me. I'm going to take a look at the course objectives here. There's 4 of them, and of the 4 of them, I would really say that the most important thing that I think you might get out of this is to be able to explain the importance of analyzing a site, setting goals, and creating documentation. All the other things are really important, but they all come with a lot of practice, like applying graphic and verbal language of landscape design to make things understandable, readable, comprehensible, creating base plans with industry standard design principles, being able to present work. This all takes practice, right? And you'll work on these things as you try it over and over again. But what I'm really trying to do here in this course is explain why I want you to work landscape design through a process that involves these things of analyzing, goal setting, and sequential documentation. It really is where the essence of success lies in landscape design. So kind of keep that in mind. That's really what I'm going for here as I'm teaching the course, and the kind of the lens that I'm using when I am analyzing and grading your work. Some important information here about technical support. Long story short, if you have a question about the assignment or what's being taught in class, reach out to me and I'll answer those questions. If you have a question about how the online classroom works and how to upload files and you're having difficulty, something's not working online, contact the CE office or use the D2L helpline that Emerson talked about. They're much better at describing and coaching you through those things than I am. Okay, so in the syllabus is the course schedule, and as I mentioned before, all of the sessions are going to be organized in much the same way. We're going to start off with a review of your most recent homework assignment. I'm going to put up some examples to share and make some points about what I'm looking for, just so we can see that in a collective way. I can show you some examples of things I think were done appropriately. I'll also show you some examples of things that were done incorrectly, and I'll tell you why. It's important to be able to process constructive criticism in landscape design. In the studio, we call this a pinup critique, meaning that we take all of the cohort's work, pin it up on the wall, and start talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is how we learn about where we were successful and where we need improvement. So we'll do that in a collective way at the beginning of each session. Then we'll go into a lecture session and talk about introduce some new ideas for that particular week, and then we'll go into a demonstration of what I was trying to teach you and how I expect you to do the work for the homework assignment. Since we do go for, 2 hours plus, it's a long session, right? So we'll put a break in there somewhere. My dogs want to get fed at some point in the middle, and they tend to get cranky, so that's usually a good time for us to take a break, and I go feed my dogs and I let them out, and then they're happy for a while. The dogs do sleep in my office. Occasionally the postal carrier will come right about this time, and they may freak out, so just say hi to Bubba and Gracie, and we'll muddle through, and I'll just try to ignore them. Okay, they're not paying attention. Okay, that's good. All right. So as we're looking at the each week's content, you'll see what we're doing with the date, the time, and then what we're doing that day. And then you'll see in the last column what is due on that particular day, which of course is also being communicated to you on D2L in the calendar item, and that should notify you that something is due for that particular week. A comment about assignments. I put the deadline here as just before the stroke of midnight, the day before our class, which should give you ample time to get it in. I know that life occasionally does get in the way, and sometimes you might miss a deadline. If you miss a deadline, it's okay. Go ahead and put it in the Dropbox. Not going to close on you. It'll be there. I just won't prioritize grading your homework, until I'm done with all the others. And when it comes to the course, generally I don't take points off for lateness. You're adult learners, but most likely with jobs and other commitments and things going on, I know life happens. So long as you're keeping up with the work, and you're keeping pace for the most part up until the final assignment, that's fine. I'll do my best to grade it, but again, I'm going to prioritize the work that's done on time rather than grading yours. So I might not get to your backlogged assignments for a while. However, once we get to the submissions of our concept designs around October 14th. If I feel like you are substantially behind at that point, it's going to be difficult for me to adequately grade your work that's due on October 14th if I'm not up to date on all your stuff beforehand. So if you're significantly behind at that point, I may ask you to recuse yourself from doing live presentations of your final work in the closing workshops. And we'll talk more about that later. Know that everything that we're doing up to this point is submitted by Dropbox, and then the final workshops are online, but you'll have the opportunity to present them via Zoom here in the online classroom. But if you're significantly behind, I might ask you if you can submit your work as printed work, but you may not have enough coaching from me to successfully do the live presentation. If you have any questions about any of those things, feel free to reach out to me. If you know you're going to be away for a while, just give me a heads up and say, hey, I'm going to miss the next 2 weeks. Try and keep up with the Zoom recordings and submit the homework assignments when you can. Okay. So hopefully all of you think that that's fair. Okay, great. See some things in the chat. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. No. Yep. So I try and keep my eyeball on the chat. If you put something in, you have a question, that's great. If you have a question that you think is, can I comment on the textbook recommended course? That's a great question. Actually, I'm going to talk about it because it was it's recommended reading. It's not required reading. That's the Booth Hiss residential landscape architecture course book. It is kind of standard reading for almost every student in landscape design and landscape architecture in academia. It's been kind of the go-to reference book for decades. I think the first one was like in the 80s or something like that. And it's been updated quite a few times. It's a good comprehensive book. And if I recommend you at least check it out in your local library and see if you like it, because it is used as a course book for a lot of academic work. It's really expensive. I forget what it is, new or even used, but I know it's 3 digits. So maybe check it out at the library first and see what you think. I do recommend it as a reference book. You may not need to purchase it, but it's a good reference to have. I know that I don't know if it's on the online library in Longwood. I'm looking at the comments here. It is called the Booth. The authors are Booth and Hiss. It is the, let me make sure I get this correct, actually. Booth, Hiss. Oh, hang on one second. Now, yep. Residential landscape architecture design process for the private residence. So we're recommending the 5th edition or newer, and it's at the bottom of the supply list for landscape design 1 under the getting started content. And we'll talk about our supply list a little bit later when we get into our studio session, the kinds of things that you'll need and how to use them, how I expect you to use them. So if you do have questions, feel free to chat. If I don't see the chat, if I'm in the middle of something and you think you need an answer right now, go ahead and unmute yourself and shout it out. If I think I should answer it right away, I will. If I think we should table it for another time, I'll let you know, or I might get back to you later via an email if I think it is too specific for the general forum. Okay. So before we get into design process, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to practice landscape design. And I often refer to what some folks refer to as the design trinity. The three entities that are necessary in being successful in the landscape design process. Then in that trinity is the 3 entities are the client, the site, and the landscape designer. And each of those entities brings something really important to the project. And the idea here is that in order for the process to be successful, all 3 of those entities need to be involved in the discussion, the iteration of the design in order for a successful project to be produced. So we think about the site. We think about the site as the capacity for the project to be built. The site determines the area and volume constraints that we're working with. It's the environmental and built conditions. What's the culture? What is the growing conditions? What's the land, the natural surrounding landscape like? What are the built conditions? What is, is it rural or urban? What's the architectural style? Are we surrounded by pavements? Is it open and natural? How has the land been developed to make it something that humans are using for their enjoyment or for financial gain or other things, or recreation? The site also is where we would reference rules and regulations. It's important to note that a lot of the things that we do in landscape design is regulated by local laws, local, state, even some federal laws. So things like zoning, building codes, even things like what we call ourselves as a practicing designer, knowing that there's a difference between a landscape designer and a landscape architect, that a landscape architect is a licensed individual in the state in which they practice, and that they have proven that they have the education, experience, and training, and they passed an exam in the state where they practice to call themselves a landscape architect. And they can practice on certain kinds of projects, typically those projects that require the stamp or seal of a landscape architect, much like an architect or an engineer or a surveyor would stamp their drawings to verify that it's been prepared by such a professional. It can be used in such a way that it protects the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Whereas a landscape designer does not necessarily carry that licensure. They're not required to. However, they practice in different ways. So we won't get into the differences here, but suffice to say that if you are not a licensed landscape architect, that you may not call yourself a landscape architect, and that you can only practice on certain kinds of projects. And they're usually smaller in scale. And as I mentioned before, projects that focus primarily on plants and incidental construction. And by incidental construction, I mean, think about the kinds of projects that you might take on as a DIY project on the weekend, building a little patio or constructing a fence or a small pergola, the kinds of things that don't necessarily require building permits or footings, foundations, covering large expanses of ground. Typically those qualify as incidental construction. However, many of those things, looking back here at the site, the rules and regulations of your municipality may regulate how much you may cover the ground or how tall that fence is allowed to be. So regardless of whether you are a landscape architect or a landscape designer, or even just a private homeowner who wants to build a patio or a little garden in your backyard, you may actually have to comply with some local laws. So I'm saying this as a caveat that before you tackle any kind of an outdoor project, you should check your local laws and ordinances in the municipality and at the level where they're regulated, where you live, and check and make sure that you're in compliance. And that may start as close of a level as, say, something like a homeowners association or a neighborhood organization or a Main Street community. They may have some regulations as to what you're allowed to do with your property. And your local municipality may have some regulations about how much pavement you can put on top of your property, or how close that deck or fence can be to your property line, or putting in an electrical receptacle that might require a licensed electrician to do it. So the world of landscape design has gotten much more regulated over the past years. And I think it's all for the good, right? It's for our safety, but it also makes things more complicated for us, for those that practice here, or even for the homeowners that have the project owners who have to pay for all these things, right? Because there's a fee associated to all of them. So keep in mind that the site bears all of those things, and the course is not long enough to cover all these things, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of those things. Likewise, the client brings some important things to the project. The client brings their vision, their program to the project. They're the ones that have the needs, the wants, the preferences. So they're the ones that are driving this project. They own it. It's their site. It's their project. They want something to happen. The client owns the site, or at least has the ability to make changes to the site. They have the authority to do so. And most importantly, the owners have the ability and willingness to commit time and money to the project, right? If we're a practicing landscape designer, then we're getting paid for this. If you're practicing as a designer as part of, say, a landscape contracting company, a design build entity, you're being paid to design and install it. So the client is bringing the executive level leadership to it. And ultimately, that means that the landscape designer, the third part of the entity, is the consultancy, right? We're the ones that are being brought on for our particular level of experience and creativity. We've been educated and trained to do this kind of work. And that's why you're here today, is to continue or begin your education in doing this work. And ultimately, you would need to be trained in order to be really effective in this kind of work. Is to study under someone, to get that apprenticeship work under a practicing landscape designer, somebody that you admire, that you emulate, whose work compels you to say, I would love to learn from this person. or simply attending the School of Hard Knocks and doing good old trial and error also works. And if you have the luxury of money and time and the ability to make an error without causing any kind of harm to self or others, then by all means, do that too. But I think one of the most important things that landscape designers bring to the owner and to the site is objectivity. We don't own it. We don't live there. We're being brought on as an impartial consultant that doesn't have any emotional ties to the site. So we can make recommendations that aren't tied to things that may have happened personally in the past. So or the fact that we become blind to certain corners of our property because we just walk in the same corners and the same paths all the time. We see things differently, right? We come in with a fresh set of eyes. So we can bring that to the client. And while we may lack any emotional connection to the project, of course, we are being paid for this work. So it's in our best interest to continue to stay on the team. So giving good advice, giving good options to the client is important because we want to continue to be part of this team, part of this design trinity of client, designer, and site. So we can see that where these areas of expertise or criteria intersect, we have project success in the middle. So think about that as we work on our design, and that we need to think about not only our own experience and creativity, but what does the client want and what can the site bear in order for us to make a recommendation as to how to move forward. Okay. So when I talk about the design trinity, or you hear someone talk about the design trinity, they're referring to something like this. All right. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the design process and where we expect to go in this course and what the other steps in the process are beyond what we're going to learn in Landscape Design 1. So this flow chart is on D2L, and you can look at it yourself. And this is actually an infographic that I use when onboarding new clients. I actually attach this to our proposals so the clients understand some of the language that we use to talk about the landscape design process. And I see you all trying to look at it. I'm going to zoom in, I promise. And where we are to use it as a roadmap of where we are now and then where we're going in our process. So this helps to clarify some things. So if we look at everything here, everything from project initiation, from when we get the first phone call, all the way through to post-construction and the project's finished, and we're watching everything thrive and cultivating it into establishment, is represented here. It is, I'm showing it here as a linear process, but much of the work that we're doing is iterative in that we're working on refining and learning and adjusting things that we're recommending as we move along in the design process. Just so you're aware of what we're doing in Landscape Design 1 in this course, we're going to be talking about this light blue and light green phases here: research and analysis, conceptual design, and schematic design. It's really the beginning stages of the process, with the intent that at the end of schematic design, the client will have an illustration of how their property can be used in the vision that they express to us at the beginning of the project, with the benefit of our analysis of the client and of the site and their wish list, and to put together what we consider to be the best possible solution on the property. at the schematic level of design, we're usually able to determine the size, shape, and placement of things in the landscape, their general character, what they're going to look like in general, and then using our experience in the industry, be able to deliver an opinion as to how much it might cost in order to establish the landscape. This is usually a sufficient amount of information for the client to determine whether or not they want to move forward in the process and become more detailed and take the next steps to actually installing the work, or realizing that what they were asking for is not realistic and that they need to adjust their expectations in some way. So we're going to get you up to that point. We are not going to do cost estimating in this course, but we will do all the other things to get us up to that point in schematic design, including things like client interviews, program development, site inventory and documentation of existing conditions. We're going to do conceptual design, where we explore and develop potential solutions for the landscape, where we create sketches, identify sources of inspiration, study form and massing and functional diagramming and circulation relationships, adjacencies of outdoor spaces, and then ultimately creating the schematic plan, where we describe the overall composition and character of the site, and defining that size, shape, and placement of those landscape elements. So that's going to be the scope for us, and that's exactly what you're going to be doing over the next 8 weeks, and you will prepare a schematic plan as your final project. We'll talk more about that later in the coming weeks. The steps after that, just so you're aware of what happens after these steps, is that we start to test and refine and detail the work that we set up in the schematic drawing, in order to provide enough information so we can navigate other processes, such as permitting with the local municipalities, or sharing our drawings with construction professionals or other vendors in order to get the plants and materials and supplies that we would need in order to build the landscape, and put together a complete set of documents that will be our instruction set, if you will, for building the landscape. And then ultimately, once all of that is done and there's a completed contract offered by the builder, that we're able to use those drawings to install during construction administration. The landscape designer is often continues to be involved as a consultant to the owner during the installation of the project. And then making sure that everything is being done the way it's supposed to be done, and then hopefully involved in the post-construction as well, observing the work, seeing how the plants are establishing, making recommendations for care and grooming and so on, maybe making adjustments to other things as necessary. I think it's also important to note at this time that I'll often refer to the designer, the owner, the client, contractors, or vendors as separate entities or separate people, knowing full well that for some of you, you might be 2 or 3 of those things. If you're the homeowner, you might be the designer and the contractor and the owner. So you are all in one, right? Or if you're in a design build contractor, you might be both the designer and the builder, and that is a viable model in the industry. So you'll excuse me if I'm talking about them differently, but what I'm really saying is that we have different roles or different modes in what we're doing when we're engaged in landscape design. At some point, we're designing things and setting design specifications, drawings, illustrations, and such, and that's the designer mode. When we're in contractor mode, we're bringing our skill set of knowing how to build things, how to install plants, how to lay a paver patio, or install some landscape lighting. And if you're the owner, then you're the one who's making sure that things are happening the way that you expect it to, that you're meeting that expectations are being met, and that you're doling out payment at the correct time. So I talk about these roles as being something different because there's different modes and ways of thinking. But you may be, and I'm aware that you may be multiples of those things. So, and sometimes that can be challenging because sometimes you're not quite sure which mode you're in, and you need to have a little bit more of an intentional mindset to say, okay, am I in designer mode, or am I in contractor mode, or am I in owner mode, right? And then act accordingly, right? So just to say, I just want to make sure I set that clear at the beginning here, that I realize that there's different ways of getting work done. I'm talking about it in ways that I feel makes the most sense. Then you can filter that as you see fit. Okay. Any questions so far? We've been at it for, gosh, almost 50 minutes. Okay. So what I would like to do, since we are at kind of a little bit of a breaking point, this is actually a good time for us to stop, take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. We'll do a lecture on site inventory and base drawings, and then we'll go into studio session and talk about the development of base drawings and plans. So what I think we'll do is I've got it's at 51 past the hour. So let's reconvene, just to make it a nice round number. Let's reconvene at 5 minutes past the hour, and then we'll get started on our lecture. All right, I'll see you soon, 5 after the hour. Okay, we are back. So I see some questions that popped up in the chat. So I'm going to hit on those just really quickly, and we'll get into more detail once we get into the studio session. So we've got the comments in the book. I think we covered on the residential landscape architecture course book. Again, that's a recommended reading. It's not a required read, but it's a good reference manual. I will say that the language that I use and a lot of other landscape designers and landscape architects use follow the outline that is used in that book. However, I will say that, and that's the way I started off in my career, I will say that I've adjusted my the vocabulary that I use, particularly when I'm talking about the design process, to more closely follow architecture, the designing of the buildings, than I do for what was recommended in that book. Mostly because most of the projects I work on are part of something being built, or someone has had something built in the past and they've worked with an architect and they've heard the language used. So the idea of concept, schematic, design development, construction documentation, all those terms are typical in architecture. So I use those, whereas those words are not used so much in landscape design. But just as a point of interest. A question here from Seymour: would schematic design typically include a plant list? And the answer is no. In schematic level design, we're not designing what the plant combinations are. Well, we would include information on what kinds of plants or what categories of plants might be used, such as shade tree, evergreen plants, large shrubs, perennials. And so we're talking about plants in broad terms, which is the kind of designations we're going to use in this course. Putting together a plant list is what I consider the work to be done in design development. We're really detailing out what those plants are. Schematic, so the schematic level would be the broad categories, and design development is which plants are they, and then construction documentation would be I need 10 of this species at that size, right? So that would be the progression, if you will, of the information in the various phases. A question here: is project cost estimating covered in another class in landscape design certificate program? I don't think it's an ongoing offering. It has been offered in the past, kind of as an elective, I think. But it comes and goes. So I don't know if it's being offered right now or not. It has been offered in the past. I don't know if there's any plans to offer it up again. I will say that Longwood is usually pretty responsive to the kinds of to the quantity of requests that it gets for the same thing. So if they keep hearing from you that they want a course on cost estimating, there's a good chance that they'll offer it because they'll feel that there's enough interest in it to justify it. So if it's not up, keep asking for it. Can we talk supplies, particularly markers? Yes, we can. We will. Supply lists, the courses. We'll talk about the supply list and what kind of materials I use. I'll talk about that as well. Oh, that many colors aren't available. Okay, so okay, interesting. That's kind of the interesting thing is, once a lot of these things is kind of like luggage. Like once you have it once, like you really hold on to it for a really long time. So yeah, it might be time to refresh our colors list. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. We'll talk about that when we get into the studio session. Thank you for your questions. Again, if I didn't answer your questions here, do feel free to either call it out while we're in session or email them to me. All right. So let's get into one of the first steps of the design process. And I say one of the first steps because when thinking about the client and the site, the two other entities in the design trinity, in order for us to be effective landscape designers, we need to have a reasonable understanding of both. So before we can design anything, we need to understand one or the other. So we can start with studying the site, or we can start with studying the client. I choose to study the site first, or talk about that first here. But both are equally important. And that we can't really make any recommendations or bring up any solutions to the client until we have that firm understanding of both. So for a little while, we're going to be kind of collecting information on faith that eventually this information will be processed and it'll actually make some sense to us. But it won't start making any sense until we actually start synthesizing it as part of the design process in the creative parts of it. Right now, we're just documenting, organizing information in places where we know where to find it, in locations where it's going to be useful to us, and we can use it at the right time during the design process. So when it comes to site inventory, we're going to be taking stock of the conditions, the factors, the elements that influence our ability to use the site: size, the land, improvements, vegetation, all manner of things we documented in our base drawings. So this is what the first step is to start organizing information for the site. So we'll just go ahead and get into it. You should all see a title slide. Super, thank you. All right. So we as landscape designers are going to be relying heavily on creating drawings in order to express the solutions that we're proposing for the site. And the most common method for doing so is in what's known as plan view, meaning that we're seeing the site from above, and that we are able to see the full extent of its length and width of the site or the property that we are working on. And if in your drafting classes, if you worked with Zach, you most likely understand the difference between seeing things in plan view versus seeing things in elevation view, section, or perspective, right? We're going to be working a lot in plan view here. And when we work in plan view, it offers us some distinct advantages in being able to arrange objects on the ground plane, meaning does the length and width of this object fit within the site that we are working on? Do we have enough room to do all the things that we want to do? And seeing things in plan view gives us the ability to do so. In order to be effective in doing that in the studio, being able to create drawings, then we need to have some sort of a starting point for those plan view drawings. And oftentimes that plan view drawing will start from a source that was created by somebody else. So one of those sources might be something like, say, aerial photography. And we're very fortunate to live in an era where this kind of information is readily available. And we can usually find it in a variety of ways that help us to understand the site. So places like Google Maps or Bing might be good ways of finding some aerial photography to see the arrangement of objects on the site that we're working on, and potentially, well, absolutely, without question, on the property that surrounds it. And I think it's important to have an understanding of not just where we're working on our particular landscape site, but also what surrounds it, because this provides context. What is the nature of the surrounding area? What's the neighborhood like? Is it densely populated? Is there a sidewalk network? What kinds of properties are next door to us? Are they residential? Are they commercial? Are they industrial? What kinds of things might those neighboring properties, or adjoiners, as we sometimes call them, do to our ability to enjoy and use the site? And does it give us some opportunities, perhaps, in order to use it? So, looking up something on Google Maps or Google Earth or Bing, you simply type the address of our project into the search bar, and an aerial view shows up. Oftentimes, those photographs are taken in the summertime. We see foliage on things. We see green things growing, if that's the color of your landscape in the place where you live. And it gives us some information as to what's happening. So looking at an image such as this one, let me get my pointer. Our subject property in this particular slide, this isn't the project we're using for our class. The subject here is this property. And so we dialed up that address, and here's where it came up. You might notice that it's called Longwood Road. This is actually adjoining Longwood property, so it's right nearby. It was a handy thing to use. So taking a look at that, at this level, don't be concerned about getting too detailed in, but what kind of things can we determine here as we look at this drawing? We might be able to see things that are rectangles. If we look closely, we might see like a line going through the center. We might be able to identify those as the roof of buildings. There might be a primary dwelling there, might be some kind of an outbuilding over here. We might also be able to discern pavements. We see a wide lane or driveway here with another smaller driveway that comes off to the side, and then a larger, looks like a parking area over here. Look closely, it might even be able to determine some vehicles parked in there. We look around at other similar objects, and across the street, we see other buildings here. If we take a look at the spacing and the rhythm and some of the nature, might be able to determine that, in fact, those are private residences. So we're looking at our subject property, and we see that it's adjacent to a fairly developed sort of suburban kind of a situation on the opposite side of the street. So some of the things that we might think about is, can I see those houses from the street? Looking at other properties adjoining them, we notice that there really aren't any buildings in the immediate vicinity, but we do see some other things. We see these circles here, which we look closely, we can determine that those are probably trees. We see some different colors of them, some dark spots, some green spots, some other different colored spots there. We're not sure quite what they are, but we know that they exist. We can also see some areas that are devoid of any of those spots. Some green modeling area throughout here. And then that ground covering area turns to a different color over here. So even though we don't know exactly what those plants are, we do know that it changes distinctively from here to here. So something's happening on that property. We look around over here and we can see some other buildings here. This lane changes direction. And then we see some other buildings. Looks like a larger storage building or a barn or some other kinds of things. And you see some pavements and some stockpiles of things. So now we're taking a look at this and realizing that maybe it is changing in character, right? So taking stock of the overall neighborhood and getting an understanding of what's surrounding us and what kind of influences that we have are important to us. Are these buildings within view shed? Is this building over here, can we see it? If it's this far away, what's happening over here? If we're out in a rural area, it could be a farm. What kind of farming are they doing? Is it are they raising corn or wheat or other agricultural crops, or are they raising livestock? Do they have cows or horses or some other kinds of animals? What kinds of operations might be going back and forth? Traffic might be some certain aromas at certain times of the year or certain times of the day that might be influencing how we enjoy our property or not, depending on which way the predominant breezes are blowing and so on. So we're getting an idea for pattern at this level and the placement of things. But do we really have a very fine, granular understanding of exactly what these things are at this level? No, not really, right? Not unless we actually see it live and in person. And this level of drawing doesn't replace being there in person, but it does help us to get ourselves organized. So we see like the relationship of spaces, but we don't know quite what they are. We can see that some things are closer than others, and that some things are further away. But we might be able to zoom in and then to get a closer look. And then some of the things become a little bit more evident. We can realize that in fact, those things are trees. We might even be able to get some information about what kinds of plants they might be. Some larger plants here. It might be a big tree or maybe a couple of big trees planted close together with green foliage. Maybe over here, this looks like maybe a tree that maybe has red foliage. And some plants over here, we see some white. So maybe these are plants that might be actually in bloom right now. Starting to get an understanding for some diversity of plant species on the property, trying to document what might be useful for us to get a better understanding of as we get closer to the property. Here we're getting a closer understanding of other pavements that might be there. We see something over here, it might be a walkway, get a clear understanding of what's happening in this driveway. We can even discern individual parking spaces and can count those things. It just so happens that this property, which is adjacent to Longwood, is formerly a private residence that was converted into an office building. So they added a parking lot to the back to accommodate the workers in that office building. But we can also see the private residences across the street, and we can make out differences in what's happening there. We can see pavements and driveways. We can see walkways, what might be a fence here in the front yard. Maybe even see that there's a swimming pool in the backyard. Trees and other things, some kind of a structure over here, and then very close, we associate it to the building over here. So as I'm seeing a drawing like this is starting to give us an understanding of the shape and placement of buildings relative to one another. We don't have a firm grasp on how big they are. We don't have a graphic scale on here to help us measure things, although there are measuring tools if you're using the online version of Google Earth or even the downloaded version. And we can use those to help us understand it, but there's varying levels of accuracy or reliability. So we're using this level of information to gain an understanding of the relationship of things, but it's only the things that are visible to the eye and for the way that this photograph is taken by satellite. So does this kind of a drawing give us all the information that we need? No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, it's all the fact that this drawing or this photograph was taken in the summertime, the nature of the elements that are in are actually obscuring some of the things that we might otherwise be able to see, say, at a different time of year. So if we were able to get a photograph that was taken, say, in the wintertime, in the mid-Atlantic when there's no leaves on the tree. We get an even clearer picture of the landscape. So finding a different source of information might be helpful in finding more information that wasn't available in something as readily accessible as Google Earth. This document was pulled from a county level GIS, Geographic Information Service website that documents properties within the county where the property is located. And many counties or other municipal levels host this kind of information on their websites. Because it's taxpayer funded, it's free for you to access. It's open to anyone to view. And you can type in the address or the owner of the parcel, and the parcel will come up. And then we get some other information that wouldn't be available, say, in Google Earth. So if you do a search where you are and enter in the name of your county or the name of your municipal level, GIS parcel maps, you can usually find this level of information or something similar to it. Because this is actually doing a couple of things. And usually this parcel level of mapping includes some information that we wouldn't get on Google Earth, particularly that they usually take their photographs in the winter. So there's no overhead vegetation obscuring a lot of the ground surface. And it often includes some information such as some approximations as to where property lines are. So if we see these yellow lines, we can see that there are the boundaries of the building parcels being outlined for us here. So this can be really helpful in helping us to understand where on the site the client is asking us to do the work and whether or not it's actually on their property. And while this is not a legal document, you couldn't use this to rely entirely on the location of the property lines. It can at least give us a general idea as to how close we are to the property lines and whether we need to be concerned about setting back from say building a fence or a patio, or making sure we're putting the tree on the correct side of the property line. So having some understanding of the parcels is really interesting. Interesting in contrast to, like, say, an image such as this, and looking at the buildings or the homes on the south side of the street, and looking at the driveways and, like, say, like where the grass changes color, is kind of interesting. If we look at those same properties in the GIS map, we can see that that property line roughly approximates where the grass changes color and how the two different owners tend their land in different ways, or mow in different patterns in different ways. Might also give us some interesting observations as to where things are. Notice how, and this lends to the idea of reliability of certain levels of information. Notice how this property line is running right through here, but notice how the image of the driveway there intersects with the property line. That may or may not be accurate. Yes, sometimes people make mistakes and they put driveways in places where they're not supposed to. But I'm going to imagine that this is an anomaly or a margin of error in the GIS content, where it's the fact that the lines and the parcels don't quite line up with the imagery and the way that it's taken. So when you see something like that in a document such as this, take that with a grain of salt that may or may not be true, but also be aware that it will speak to just how reliable certain levels of information are. We'll talk about other levels that are more reliable. Another thing that county level GIS could give us is helping us to understand the shape of the ground. And while we won't go into that in a lot of great detail in this course, it is important to know that we need to have a way of understanding how the ground rises and falls and how it affects the way that people use the land and the way that water moves across it. So when you see these bronze and gold lines snaking through the landscape, we refer to those as contour or topographic lines. And the principle here, if you're not aware, is that each one of these lines represents a certain distance or elevation vertically above a easily referenced datum. In this case, it's almost always sea level. So where sea level is 0, these lines are some distance vertically, directly up vertical from sea level. So we're able to measure how high above the point on the ground is. So any point along each of these lines is the same height above sea level. And if we look closely, we can see that there's some numbers there. I see a 430 right here, and I see a 440 up here. So I know that 440 is here, and that, well, let's see, what's this line? We're going to zoom in closer, and we'll have a better understanding here. But suffice it to say that any point along that line is the same height, and that so we know that so water is going to travel in a direction perpendicular to this line. So water is going to move. Let me get my marking pen here, make a point. So any point above, any point along this line or any other line, water is going to move perpendicular to it and going downhill. And then from this line, water is going to go downhill. And then along this line, it's going downhill. Notice how all those lines wind up pointing generally in the same direction. So we can discern that we know that water is moving in this direction and following those V shapes down to the ground. So we can look at this map and understand which direction water is moving based on the direction of the contour line. So water is always moving perpendicular to the direction of that line. We can also make some assumptions that the closer together the lines are, the steeper the site is, and the further apart they are, the flatter the site is. So if we look at an area, say, such as down here, where these lines are fairly far apart, that area is rather flat. But if we look at this area up in here and how close those lines are together, that's a really steep area over here. And while the degree or the percentage of that slope is kind of beyond the scope of this course, know that when reading a plan like this, we're going to be looking at those kinds of areas and saying, well, you know, if I've got an area where the lines are close together versus an area where the lines are far apart, if I'm looking to do, say, something like building a patio, where the ground would be helpful if it were level, or at least be more convenient to build or less costly, I'm going to look for the flat ground rather than the steep ground. Likewise, if I'm planning on making an improvement, I'm going to avoid areas of concentrated water flow, because I know that every time it rains, water is going to be coursing through that location. And this is the essence of site analysis and documenting where things are happening and finding the best location for the things that we plan to do with the property. And this will make more sense as we continue to go forward. So to do a zoomed in view of that same image, we can get even more detail and a better understanding of what the property looks like. We can also see that there are smaller lines in between those heavier lines that give us even more granular detail as to what the shape of the ground is. So here we can see 440, here we can see 430. So I know that between this line and that line, the change in the height of the ground is 10 feet, right? So we could take a horizontal measurement between those and then get an understanding of what the percentage of slope is, and then using some known quantities in certain charts, we can make an understanding as whether or not that percentage of slope is suitable for different kinds of activities. So again, a little beyond the scope of this course, but know that we would use drawings such as this in order to determine such things. It's also helpful to look at an image that's taken at different times of year, because this will actually give us some better understanding of different species of plants that are present on the ground. So now we can see that here, this wintertime image, plants such as this are casting this cone-shaped shadow. So we might determine that that might be an evergreen tree of more of like a cone-shaped plant, whereas something like this plant, which is putting this this sort of a river basin kind of a look, which is the shadow of a deciduous tree, is being cast on the ground, and we can see the extent of its canopy over here. So now we can discern the differences between evergreen plants and deciduous plants, and even get some additional visual cues as to changes in plant type as we cover the ground. This area looks like mowed grass, whereas this area looks like maybe seasonally mowed grass, or maybe meadow or something like that. So this level of drawing can be really helpful to start giving us some of the elements that are in the landscape, but at some point we're going to have to get a more specific, measured inventory of what's actually happening on the property. So base drawings such as this can be used to form the starting point for other drawings, and then help us to get the space arranged and have an understanding of it. And then we can take those drawings out into the field to take more specific measurements of the things that matter most to us. So for instance, in this project that we were working on, we looked at some Google Earth imagery. We were asked to create a landscape around this swimming pool area off in the backyard of their property. And there were some other things out here to the south of the pool that we're asked to design. But you'll notice that it's really obscured by shade, so we don't have a really good view of it. So we looked for some other sources of information. We were able to find a county image that was taken in the wintertime. And now we have a better understanding of the kinds of things that were there. So we were able to discern things such as the edge of the woods line. There's some trees here. But there are some existing trees here. And the owner showed us that there is actually a barn or some kind of a building ruin right here. We have the swimming pool here. And we have this planting bed here. There's part of that ruin right there, some walls that were remaining. There's also a very large tree right there. And we also got some edge of the meadow right here. So we were able to identify those elements because we did do a site visit with the owner after they had engaged us for the project, and that would give us an understanding of which things were where. I just saw a image pop or a question pop up. Oh yes, scale. So as a matter of fact, when we're using something like Google Earth, fortunately, we have a graphic scale drawn into it. So we can see that this amount of distance equals 80 feet in the drawing. So we can use that to help approximate it. But again, even so, we don't know exactly how long these things are unless we go out into the field and measure them. So that's exactly what we did with this level of information. We did a site visit, met with the clients, understand their needs. And then what we did is we took this image and we printed it on a piece of paper. And then we took that piece of paper out into the field and used it to guide our measurements so we could create a scale drawing that we can use in the studio to do our final designs. So we blurred out or grayed out the aerial image just enough so we could still make out the outlines of it, but made it light enough so we could actually draw over top it and be able to see it. So now that we had the aerial image to guide the shape and the arrangement of things on the ground plane, then we can go out with the landscape and take some actual physical measurements to understand how big things are. So we use a simple letter key measurement. We just label these things with a letter code like G, F, and E here. And then we measure the corners of the pool, and then we take a measurement from E to F, and then we record it over here in a table on the side and record that distance. And then we can take that information back into the studio. So recreating things like rectangles, if you've been working in drafting before, it's really easy to create a rectangle or a straight line. It's a straight line between 2 points. We measure off the distance, and then we go perpendicular to the opposite direction to get the width, G and F, and then we can easily recreate a rectangle. But things can be a little bit more challenging with irregular shapes like planting beds. So we would take measurements in a couple of directions to verify our accuracy. So here we have A and B and D and C. So we can at least get the overall length and the overall width, verify that. I would probably have also taken a measurement at this location and this location so I can get the widest point, the middle point, and that medium point, and get those dimensions recreated accurately on my base drawing. And we did the same thing with other things. This is also the opportunity for us to take more specific notes as to the species of trees. So we found Ulmus parviflora, Viburnum burkwoodii, yellowwood, Cladrastis lutea. And we also made some notes as to what we were observing from the way that water is moving across the site. We noticed some directions of water drainage. We took some notes of those things. So when we're doing what we call a measured inventory, we're getting the amount of information that we need in order to make good choices in the landscape and measuring out the things that are critical for our activities. Again, this is usually in response to planting, but it might be some incidental construction like laying out a fence or a small patio. And for that level of work, this type of documentation is appropriate. However, we might be working on other more complex projects where we need even more detail and we need it at a higher level of accuracy. The great thing about everything that we've seen up to this point is the information has either been free and available on the website, and then we add our own labor to take some measurements to verify dimensions and accuracy. But when we get to the next level of information, we might actually need to shell out a few bucks in order to do it. So whereas everything before was what I call a measured inventory, a document such as this is known as a survey, meaning that it was prepared by a licensed surveying professional who has experience, training, and the equipment to take very accurate measurements to document all the necessary features in a landscape, including things that we might not be able to see, such as property lines. They can document those things. And here, this property actually has a very unusual shape. Check this out. We can find property lines. If we're doing things like larger patios or maybe doing a detached garage or a shed or building a swimming pool, things such as setback lines, how close we're allowed to place those features relative to the building envelope, the property line, become very important. So the surveyor will determine based on local code where those setback lines are, and they'll draw those things in. As well as the visible improvements, buildings, patios, driveways, other dependencies, even things like swing sets or raised planting beds. We'll even document all the existing trees, where they are and what size they are. And all this information may be important depending on the kind of project that you have. It might also be the kind of document that the owner of the project might already have if they've already been involved in a construction project, or they had this information developed because they wanted to know where their property lines were just out of curiosity. So asking for this level of information is a good practice to get into to see if they have these kinds of drawings already in their possession. If they do, and if they're current and accurate, then that can be a great cost savings, because a drawing such as this for this property, which might be a couple of acres, with this level of detail of topography, buildings, plants, and so on, this could easily be a $6,000, $7,000 document. So it could be a substantial cost savings. But of course, you wouldn't authorize or pay for this level of detail if it weren't completely necessary and driven by the project, such as building a swimming pool or a large patio, where we're talking about things in the tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the cost of this is actually quite small compared to the improvements that we're making. So having an understanding of the level of work that we're doing will inform us or advise us as to what level of work we need to take on to document existing conditions. Now, the point here is that all this information can come at a variety of levels and different accuracy. And all of these drawings may come with other things on the drawing that we may or may not actually need. So our job at the beginning is to collect this information and find out all the things that are available, and then compile it into one document, and then glean out just the information that we need, so we can express it in a readable and digestible format. So that's what we're going to do here in our studio session. One last comment before we move on is it really is a good starting point to ask the owner, or if you are the owner, to check your home ownership files. A lot of times in the same folder where you keep your home ownership documents, you might already have a survey included there that might have been from the previous owner. Or check your files from another project you might have done. If you did an addition to your home, or you added a detached garage, a lot of times this level of documentation was necessary to do those kinds of projects. So taking a look at your files or asking for them to take a look can be very helpful in finding out what kind of information already exists. So once we've done some searching through those sources to find what kind of information is available, we're going to organize that information and kind of stack them and determine their accuracy, and then glean out the information that we need. So I'm going to shift over to my drawing table and start talking a little bit about how we create those kinds of drawings. But before I do, any questions before I move on? And by the way,
I have one question.
Sure, go ahead.
Just like a random question. For like the setbacks, is that like standardized by like the local municipality? Oh,
Yes, at the local level, right? So it's not standardized globally. So each individual municipality that promulgates those zoning codes have their own set of setbacks. So,
and is it different for like the type of structure, whether it's like a deck or like a garage?
yes. Yes, so there's different setbacks for different kinds of buildings. The primary dwelling usually has a deeper setback, or a larger setback than, say, something like a shed or a swimming pool, where they would give you more room to get closer to the property line. And also keep in mind that the municipality where you live, or where your project is, might have completely different setback distances than the very next municipality just next door. Right, so they all create their own laws, and depending on where you live, like where I live in Pennsylvania, all of these laws are promulgated at the township level, meaning a relatively small level of government, which means that I only have to drive about 15-20 minutes, and I'm working with a completely different set of rules. Whereas if I go just over the border into Delaware, which is just 15 minutes south of me, they promulgate these rules at the county level. Well, there's only 3 counties in the whole state of Delaware. So it makes it a whole lot easier. It's like, oh, okay, they have the same rules here as they do over there because I'm still in one county. It's like a third, a third, a third. So you really have to be aware as to where you're working and knowing what the rules are in the place where you are, which is why I made the caveat at the beginning. It's like, these rules are different for everybody. You need to be aware of the rules that you have where you're working.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So I'm going to switch my camera over to my desk cam. Oh, and I need to change it so it's mirrored, so you're not looking at it backwards or not mirrored. There we go. I'm gonna pin that up to the top. Pull this out a little bit. We'll make that better in a minute. So before I get into working on the drawing, let's talk a little bit about tools and supplies. Now, 1 second, we'll pull something up here. There we go. Okay, so a few things that were in the supply list. So first off is there we go. Is the architect's scale, triangular in its section and divided up into measurements that are in fractions of an inch. This will be the scale we'll be using for our drawings. There's also another scale called an engineer's scale, which is divided into tenths of a foot, which is the way that engineers like to measure things. And I can understand why, because it's so much easier doing math with decimals than it is with fractions. But we like to do things the hard way here in landscape design. So fractions it is. So you should have something that looks like this. This will be a very important tool that you will use pretty much every single time you're working on a drawing. We also have the Alvin rolling 12-inch ruler. Did Zach require you to have this? Does anybody know?
Yes.
He did. Okay, great. So you've used this before. Yep, to see a thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So love this tool. I keep this in my bag with me all the time. It replaces a number of tools such as triangles and parallel bars and adjustable triangles. So I can do all manner of things. The main thing that I use it for is to create straight lines and to be able to create those straight lines parallel to one another, or using the compass feature to set a particular angle relative to the compass in the center. Here I have 45, and then be able to draw that angle repeatedly until I move it. The key to using this thing well is to use a light touch by just using one finger. So you want everything to stay parallel, just use one finger and allow it to roll. Apparently you can also use it for taking measurements here in this little window over here, which is a novel idea. I really have not used it that way before, but that's a pretty nifty thing that you can do as well. We'll talk about some techniques for using that as we get deeper into it.
What's that one called, Daniela?
This is called a rolling ruler.
Okay, thanks.
Can I
You're
make
welcome.
a comment? So
Yes.
I did not have one of those, and I went online to find,
Mm-hmm.
and Alvin appears to be out of stock on 12 inches and only has 6 inches, but there was another brand that had both 12 and 6 together in a pack, and they were like
Super.
$10.
Okay, great. I'm not married to the Alvin brand, although it is a slightly better brand of drafting equipment. So suffice it to say that you have some tool that does what this thing does, you're good to go.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The next thing on the list is the circle template. which might look something like this. Boy, I just got a chunk taken out of mine, so won't be using that circle anytime soon. Again, the list, it says 1 7/8 diameter down to 1/16, which I think this one's a little bit bigger. I have a few more bigger circles than you do. We're going to be using this for helping us to do complete circles and create guidelines for plant symbols and some other things. So it'll be a very handy tool to have. But if yours doesn't look exactly like this, or so long as it creates circles of varying sizes, that's really the main idea here. A roll of trace paper. Let me pick this up a little bit. There we go. Yeah. Trace paper, might as well be beat up. When it comes to cutting this, I like using the crease and tear method, but you can use a scissors or a razor knife or other way of cutting it, but it does tear rather easily. It also can be a little bit difficult to manage, so we'll talk about how I use it, but being cognizant of the curled end and setting that face down is a good way of managing that. I'll show you that technique in just a minute. I seem to be all out of drafting dots. Well, I use drafting dots to secure our drawings to our work surface, but I am actually using these weighted bags. There's little leather bags with some BBs in it that I became aware of when my wife was working at a framing shop, and they used these suckers to hold the prints down flat while they were measuring everything out. So this is kind of a neat little thing. So quality picture framing products. That's what I'm using to help me here, but using dots is a more secure way. I like using these because I can switch out drawings quickly, which I do a lot of in these exercises. But you might want to look into maybe getting a few of these. I've got 4 of them to hold down each corner, but they're not necessary. And then things like colored pencils or so it really is a matter of preference as to which colors you use, but I like having some things that are kind of earth toned and landscape tones. I've got some golds and reds and oranges, of course, like 4 different kinds of green, a dark purple, sort of a dark red. You know, if you've got 5 or 6 colors, you have enough. I've been collecting these suckers and adding to my little collection here for over a long period of time, and obviously I get a lot of use out of them as well. So you'll find the ones that you like best and which looks the best for you. So don't be too concerned about which colors you have of those. We also I like color pencils for certain things, particularly for smaller drawings. But for larger drawings, or when I'm trying to cover a lot of real estate, no pun intended, we do like using chart pack markers, which are these guys here. They have this great wedge-shaped point, so we can do a broad side with one direction or do a fine point with the other. They take a little bit of getting used to. They work better on trace paper than they do on bond. The bond just sucks up the ink really, really fast. They get really hard to control, whereas the trace paper doesn't absorb it as quickly, so you have a little more control over what it looks like. And I'll show you how those things are used a little bit later, not today. With regards to which colors, my apologies if those colors are no longer available. We'll get that updated, but suffice it to say that a good starter set will include some colors that have a few different greens in it. I have things like pale olive and let's just get all these guys out. Pale olive and Nile green and pale lime. Those are some really nice green colors. I've got some golds and oranges like cadmium orange, deep salmon. I've got a purple here, like purple iris. And I also like to have some grays. I prefer lighter colors. Here's cool gray number 7, which about is like the darkest one that I would probably ever use. I like things more like, I love sepia. It's actually one of my favorites.
Quick question. What would you
Yeah.
use them for as opposed to the colored pencils?
So we'll talk about it later as we get into more of our rendering drawings. But what's better about this is it takes a lot of effort to use the colored pencil to fill in a lot of area, and you tend to see a lot of the line strokes with those. Whereas with the chart pack markers, I can fill big swaths of area with this, and when it's done on trace paper, you don't even really see the lines of overlap, so it makes a nice, clean, uniform color. So depending on now, the difference is you have more control over tone with colored pencil, whereas with this, it's sort of like it's either it's on or it's off for the most part. So I use them in different ways, and you'll see how we use them as we go forward in the coming weeks. You don't need both. I would say that if I had one over the other, if I would only buy one, I would buy colored pencils first. A, they're cheaper. B, they're more versatile. They might be a little bit more work, but you can do a few more things with colored pencils than you can do with chart packs. But I will say I like having both.
Yeah, and I heard that coloring, it can be therapeutic, so
It can be.
additional benefit.
But also these things have a great fragrance, so you never know. I mean, that might be therapeutic also. I'm kidding. The fragrance is horrible on these things. It's very bad.
So now there are a lot of alcohol markers out in the market.
Yeah, what do you think?
I haven't used chart pack a lot. I have used it a couple of times.
Yeah.
But because of whatever's in them, I prefer the alcohol.
Okay. Yeah, the xylene in the chart pack markers can be it can give me a headache if I'm not using it in a well-ventilated room. So I don't know how good the alcohol markers are, but yeah, you need to be aware of that as well. Now, also, I mean, sometimes I think the colored pencils kind of smell bad too. They kind of smell like a musty basement or something, but that's just me. Oh, and then the last couple of tools that we need and the things that we'll be using probably the most, a Papermate flare and a Sharpie. These are my favorite drawing tools. You will never find me without a Papermate flare, medium point black in my hand. I use it for just about everything. Get in here. And this is also in the supply list. I like it for its versatility, for its accessibility. You can buy it pretty much anywhere where office supplies are sold. The marker is permanent on paper, and but it doesn't bleed, unlike the Sharpie, which does bleed and will mark on everything. This will only mark on paper. So you just need to be careful about where we're marking. So we can get finer lines. I actually do all my note taking and writing with Papermate flares. And then when I want to do a bold line or do heavy brush strokes or signing a football after I make a big game-winning touchdown, I use just kidding, I don't play football, but I watch it on TV. Then we use the Sharpie. So these are some handy tools, and again, very accessible. There's all kinds of wonderful drafting specific markers and out there that you can try that come at different price points or accessibility. So I recommend, my recommendation is start with the something that is easy to find at a price point that you're willing to pay. Give it a try, see what you think. If it doesn't work out for you, go up from there, because you can spend a lot of money on a fancy drafting marker that you may or may not need. I'm a frugal person and I love these. And I will tell you that I run a professional practice, and I run my professional practice with these. No, I'll also say that I don't do all my final drafting with pen. Once I get to a certain level in the planning process, specifically the schematic or sketch concept level, I take my drawings and I transfer them to CAD and I finish my drawings on the computer. But I do all of my thinking using these tools. So all the things I'm going to be teaching you in this course are things that I do in my own practice every day. And they serve me quite well for creativity, accuracy, and I think they will serve you well too. Okay. Any questions about the supplies? Okay. All right, so let's take a look first at our base drawing. So this base drawing is representative of something that either we found information online, or the owner gave us drawings that deemed to be accurate. So when we're given a drawing, one of the first things that we need to do is determine whether or not it is accurate. So the only way that we can do that is if we have a known distance on the drawing that we can corroborate with the actual site. So either we need to measure this building wall with a scale. We're checking here. We are in 1/8 inch scale. So it says on the drawing. So we're going to find 1/8 inch scale on the scale. And then we can measure the wall here, starting at 0 and measuring over to the reading end over here at 43 feet. So once we take that measurement, we can take a tape measurement out into the field and see if indeed corner to corner, the building measures 43 feet. So that only works if you're actually on the job site. So you might have a little delay in being able to verify the accuracy of this drawing. Another way that we might be able to do it is to see if there's a dimension on the drawing that we can check to see if it is indeed accurate. So if we look around on the drawing, we can see that there indeed is a drawn measurement here. This one says that from this point here where the dimension line meets the hash mark to this point here where the dimension line meets the hash mark at the building wall is 20 feet 7 inches. So we can check the accuracy of this drawing by laying the scale out from that starting point at 0. Starting at 0 over here, and then reading over to the last whole number before the wall. We see that there's 20 plus a little bit of a gap. So then we slide the 20 over to the wall and then read the inches over here at the other line. And I can look at the hash mark, and it's just past the center mark, which is 6 inches. So that seems to be reasonably accurate, that my scale is reading 20 feet 7 inches and the line says it's 20 feet 7 inches. So I'm confident that that line is accurate. I also like to see if I can find a dimension going in the opposite direction, something perpendicular to it. Sometimes drawings can get skewed in the way that they're printed, or in the settings that are chosen when the drawing was printed. So I found another measurement over here, which says 1710. So I'll line up the 0 at the building wall and measure down. And we'll notice that the measurement ends at 16. So the next hash mark would be 17. So then we'll line up 17 there. and then measure over here, and that looks to be somewhere about the second or third hash mark, or the third or fourth hash mark. So it looks like that's around 10 inches. So that direction seems to be accurate as well. So based on that the measurements on the drawing are checked out with my scale, then I feel fairly confident that this drawing is accurate. And I believe that you will find that the one sent to you will be accurate also. Okay.
Dan, just to make sure I have the terminology correct, you're
Yes.
calling it a drawing. Is this the base plan,
Yes.
site plan?
So the term base plan is a broad term for any drawing that we're using to provide foundational, and I use that word in a broad term, foundational information about the site. A base plan might have information about property lines, or a base plan might have information about vegetation, or pavements, or topography, or other things. You won't find a drawing set that labels something as a base plan, because we're using the base plan to inform our first set of drawings. So for instance, this drawing here is called a site plan, right? It's a drawing that was prepared by someone that says this is what the site looks like. It might have been called an existing conditions plan or something else, but we are using it as base plan or base information for understanding the site, where we need some of this information, but we don't need all of it. Does that make sense?
I think so. So the base plan is just our reference point that we'll start from for all future design work. And
That's
the site
correct.
plan is just one source of information for that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. So because there's a lot of information on this drawing, there's the building, this line here, those lines give us certain information, such as the dark lines reference the walls of the building. This symbol here represents a door. These openings with the line in the middle represent windows. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. This guy's having a hard time coming into focus.
Would you mind enlarging your screen? So it's right now the size of each of our.
I have mine pinned to the top of the image. So what you can do is up in the upper right-hand corner of Zoom, you can go to speaker view, and it should make the drawing as big as your
Got
screen.
it.
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yep. Okay. So things about the building: windows, doors. We have double doors over here. There's some labeling here as to what the different rooms are. There's even some information about the height of the floor. The floor elevation here is at 99 feet 6 inches. The floor here is at 100 feet. So again, referencing things, this is surveyor speak, in that they're using sea level elevation or some other kind of benchmark to reference the height here. This drawing also has topography or contour information. We can see this dashed line here is giving us information about landform. So this is labeled as 98. This line over here is labeled as 99. So by reading this drawing, we know that we have contour information that the ground is 99 feet above sea level. It's going down to 98. But then when we get over here to the first floor, that first floor is at 99.6. So the floor here is 1 foot 6 inches above the ground right here. And likewise, the floor from here to here goes up 6 inches, since this one is at 99.6 and this one is at 100. So this drawing gives us some good information about the heights of things, at least to the point where it references the floor and the contours. There's also a lot of information about existing plants. There's azaleas and hydrangeas and Japanese hollies. There's some existing trees here. There's some kwans and cherries. Also information about stone edging and concrete curbs. Things like a 50-foot ROW, which in surveyor speak, ROW refers to right of way, meaning that the street here, North Street, has a 50-foot right of way. The concrete curb is there, but the right of way to the street is out to here, which means that everything inside that line is owned by whichever entity owns the street. So they own the street, they own the sidewalk, and everything up until this line. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have use of the sidewalk or even the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the curb, which actually you do. In most municipalities, it's the responsibility of the property owner that has the sidewalk going through it to maintain the sidewalk, shovel it in the wintertime, care for the vegetation in this strip and so on. It's your responsibility, even though you don't have exclusive claim to it. You're sharing it with the right-of-way owner. Drawing also has information about things like climbing hydrangeas and lattice fences. There's even a concrete wall over here of some sort, but there's no information about that concrete wall. It just says concrete wall. We don't know how tall it is or why it's there. It just says concrete wall. So when I see something like that isn't descriptive enough, I'm going to have some questions where I might have to go visit the property myself in order to understand exactly what it is. Hence, having a detailed drawing like this doesn't exclusively mean that we can rely on all the information. We might still need to satisfy some things for ourselves on site. So the assignment for this week is for you to recreate this drawing graphically, but only showing certain amounts of information. So if I go to the assignment here, it says trace the given drawing to create a base plan that shows the buildings, pavements, trees, and property boundary. And I want you to pay special attention to line quality, line types, line hierarchy, and cleanliness. So the point here is that we have this base drawing that has all this information, but all the information that we really need is the building, pavements, trees, and property boundary. So some of the ways that we can reproduce that information into our cleaned up site plan. We'll take our trace paper. I'm going to roll out enough it covers my whole drawing. Yeah. Pull up that sheet. I'm going to flip it over so the inside of the roll is going down. That way the edges lay out flat. And I'll line it over that base drawing, and I'll just secure the edges with my weights. Lay it down flat. We can weight down the corners as well. I'm going to just do this one time here. So it says that I'm paying careful attention to line quality and line types and hierarchy and cleanliness. So when I say line quality, what I mean is that we're creating lines that have a consistent width and a consistent darkness. Now, getting consistent darkness isn't very difficult when we're using pens. If you choose to use pencil, then you may have a harder time. Let's say if you're using a mechanical pencil, say, such as this one. If you're not pressing down uniformly with your mechanical pencil, then you may have a hard time keeping the weight consistent. But so long as you're pressing with the ink, with an ink pen, usually it's going to be pretty uniform. So we're using our drafting tools as a guide. And here I'm going to show how I might use the rolling ruler to create the lines on the building. I could use my Papermate. So I'm going to align my rolling ruler to the edge, press down firmly with this finger here so it's not going to move, and then try and keep that pen as perpendicular to the drawing surface as possible. Don't shove the tip into the corner created by the table and the rolling ruler. You're going to get too much ink into that corner and most likely make smudges. So try and make it go straight up and down. Something like a little overstrike. I might do the inside and outside edge of the wall. Do the same thing here. Inside and outside edge. When I come to a doorway, I like leaving a gap on the inside line where the doorway is. And then I can go in the opposite direction. No ball there. Ball there. So on. We'll get our inside edges of the doors and the windows. I think I've got some windows down here. For things like the door swing, we can go like so. Then we can grab our circle template. We'll align the hash marks between the horizontal and vertical lines. So here this hash mark here aligns with the horizontal line of the door, and here the hash mark aligns with the door sill. I'll draw that and do the same thing on the other side. There we go. So when I talk about line quality, I'm talking about how consistent the darkness and thickness of the line is. So if I lay a piece of blank paper underneath, we can take away all the other lines to see how well we did. And that looks pretty good, right? So I did some overstrike here. So I don't like my overstrike. I overstruck too far on this side. Whereas my overstrike here is uniform. So I don't mind that so much where I overstruck in both directions. I only overstruck on one side here. So that doesn't look so good to me. Another thing that we might want to do to make this look a little bit cleaner is that once we have the outer edges, we can infill that whole wall with a couple passes of the pen and make a nice heavy line. And that makes it nice and dark. It makes it very readable. So when I say line hierarchy or the line weights, having a thicker line versus a thinner line helps us to understand which elements are most important in the drawing. So when I see a thick or heavy line, it's usually some kind of a dominant element in the landscape, like a building wall. Whereas if I were to draw, like, say, this paver walkway in the front, that would be a thinner line. Equally dark, but not as wide as the building wall. Maybe we can grab my circle template, find a circle that matches up with that arc. And I'm not going to trace all of them. Then you find a smaller one that fits the interior. and make that match up. So the heavier lines read as more dominant than the thinner lines. So that's what I mean by line hierarchy. When I talk about line type, and I know this is probably a recap from what you learned from Zach, but the line type or the line style helps us to understand differences between things that may not be visible or might be overhead. Say things like, for instance, the property line. Now this one reads as a solid line, but if you look really closely, it actually is a dashed line. And we might use, like, perhaps this is a good time to use the Sharpie, because usually I like to make a nice heavy line for the property boundary. So we'll align that. We go long, short, 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 long, short, 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 long, short, 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 and so on. So every time we see that pattern of line, we know that we're talking about the property line. Whereas, say if we're looking at, and this is just as a for instance, this line, circle, line, circle, line, circle, that symbol means fence. You don't have to trace the fence. But know that when we use that line style, every time we see that, it means fence. So again, the assignment is for you to trace the buildings. So that'd be the house and the garden shed, and the pavements. That would be the asphalt driveway, the concrete sidewalk, and I think you should include the curb as well. The trees, and when I say trees, there's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4 trees on the property. Trace those, and then the property boundary. So when I do something like a tree, and here's something that I'm going to say is acceptable. For something like this big circle here, a lot of times I'm not going to have a circle template that's big enough for that. But if we have on the drawing the circle here of the perimeter of that tree, we can actually create a plant symbol of sorts using that. So I'm going to take my pen and just using the line in the base plan as a guideline, I'll trace the outer edge of that tree and create a plant symbol that indicates those trees. And then on the inside, you can see the circle, which is the center of the tree, or that's the trunk. And I like to fill it in, make a solid dot. And maybe these trees over here, because they're a different species, maybe I'll just give it a slightly different symbol. About. So when you are done, you will have only those objects that we talked about a moment ago drawn. So you don't have to draw any of the fences or the smaller shrubs or such. The idea here is for you to do your very best job in creating neat, clean, readable lines with good line weight and good line hierarchy. Now, another thing that I will say, that takes a lot of time. another way you can do this, if you have the inclination, is you could freehand this. And there is something quite nice about a neatly traced freehand drawing. And I say neatly traced. So if you have a steady hand and you want to give this a try, I will accept free-handed drawings, but they have to be neat and clean. They need to have line hierarchy. They need to be legible. They need to be readable. If they're not, I'm going to call you out on it. Also, notice how I'm using a scrap piece of paper to set my hand on, so I'm not smudging the things that I've already drawn. So because the oils on your skin will smudge and make dirty marks on the paper. Hello. Focus, please. Come on. I know you can do it. There we go. All right. So something like that is acceptable as well. As a matter of fact, when we're in the design process, being able to quickly and neatly trace over lines to go over various iterations of design can be a very helpful skill to have. So my recommendation to you is to give it a try both ways. Try using the tools to make things sharp and crisp if you need the guideline, but also try your hand at freehand and see if you can be equally neat and consistent. The goal here is readability, right? So whatever methods you need in order to be consistent is the method that you should employ. Any questions?
Do we need to do the right-of-way line or just the property line?
Just the property line.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, then I will leave you to it. Give yourself some time to try these things a few times. Don't leave it to the last second. Have some fun with it.
One
Great
more
first-
thing
Yes.
before we leave. Do you mind? I cannot find your email address, but to be honest, I haven't gone through our website yet. But do you mind dropping in a chat so we have it readily
I will
available?
do it right now.
That would be the one thing. Thank you.
Be happy to do it. Great. Oops. I'm pretty sure that's it. Hold on 1 second. Oh, that's wrong. Ignore that. Here. It's the second one. dmaffei@longwoodgardens.org. I accidentally combined my work email and my Longwood Gardens email.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we go? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Great first session. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
So
night.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.